Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, the guide to Italian travel. I am Nathaniel Mellor.
And I'm Darcy Melton.
And we're still working on Nathaniel's pronunciation and elocution. If you have not heard our last episode, which should have come out about 6 seconds before this one, that was on hotels and flights and the best time to book them and some best booking practices kind of thing. And we'll do a recap at the end of this episode in case you didn't hear it, or in case you did and you want to recap, or in case you've spaced out these episodes. Recaps, I think, are just important. It's like a too long didn't read, but I guess at the end of everything instead of the beginning, which is usually where the too long didn't read goes, isn't it? So Darcy's giving me a strange look, which is usually a time to
to move on,
to end the tangent and to move on. In this episode, we are going to talk about when to book a train ticket and sort of the best, or even a bus, but that one we'll get into later and explain why it's a little bit less of a issue. And some of the best practices for booking a train trip. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think so.
Before we get started, as very briefly, we just want to say thank you to everybody who has been following us and who has been leaving ratings and reviews. It does really help us out. I think it boosts us up in the Spotify homepage thing and on Apple and stuff. It's the more reviews and the more interaction we get, the higher we seem to do on those things, which means the more people see us. So we really, really appreciate that. And we also appreciate the people who have been using our booking affiliate link that's been in the description of the last few episodes. While it is not, thousands and thousands of dollars, it is an incredible amount of money for a passion project. So it is, and it allows us to buy like new, what are those, the booms or something like that? The little $20 booms to hold the mic over our face rather than using boxes and books. So one day when we're going to be recording this with like video, this is going to look so much nicer, I hope. So yes, thank you all to everybody who has been helping support us in the various ways you have been. It does make us feel really good, and it shows that, I don't know, y'all care.
Exactly. It makes our hearts happy.
It makes our hearts happy. So thank you all so much. And without any further ado, let's get into trains.
Yeah, let's do it.
Planes and even automobiles. Okay. Did they remake that one recently or no? I thought they redid.
Did they? I have no idea.
Oh, that original.
I didn't see it.
You haven't seen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
No, I'm saying I didn't see the new one.
Okay.
I'm sure at some point I saw the original. Don't really remember it though.
It's good. I mean, it's one of those like uncanny things because sometimes you're like, man, that just looks like hell on earth.
I'm not remembering what this movie is. The more
Steve
you talk
Martin,
about it. Is it like Airplane?
No. It's just a guy who is like, I think his flight's canceled and he has to get home to the holidays, and he teams up with I can't remember his actor's name, his co-star's name, but kind of tries to get home, and the co-star's just sort of, testing his patience, having to live together at a motel.
The guy who's like always silly.
I think
he was
so,
in other stuff with.
Yeah,
with
he was
Martin.
in Cool Runnings as well.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
I'm totally spacing on his name for some reason. He's SNL. Anyway, so this is really not what the episode is about. Whoever's listening to this going, what is going on right now? I apologize.
Somebody out there knows the answers to all of our
and they're
questions.
screaming. They're like, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to trains.
So in the last episode, we talked about like the best time to book hotels, the best time to book flights, because it does seem a little bit, I don't know, just it almost like doesn't make sense, I guess. There's a better word for that. Like it just seems
they feel a bit out of order in the way that you should book them.
Yeah, like we suggest booking hotels ahead of time because hotels
months ahead of time.
Months ahead of time. Sorry, yes. Right.
While we're talking about booking flights weeks ahead of time.
That's a good
and trains are
really the reason I think you and I would kind of recommend holding off to as long as you can is for a variety of reasons. And when we do say trains, we mean trains in Italy, to be very clear. This is still an Italian podcast. But for a variety of reasons, and briefly, those reasons could be, like for instance, if you're going from Rome to Florence and you know that your checkout time is like 11 and you're like, okay, let's get the train for 11:30 or 12. Sounds great. But if your trip in Rome, you haven't seen as much as you want to see, you might want to get that 2 p.m., 3 p.m. train to Florence instead and leave your bags at the hotel and see a little bit more. So it's kind of like it's also the trains just don't change in price that drastically. They do go up a little bit in price. Like if I looked at a Frecciarossa, which is the fast train from like, let's say Salerno to Rome tomorrow, it might be $60, $70 per euros per person. And if I look at like 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now, it might be like 54 euros per person. The regional trains don't move at all. Those are if you happen to take
the prices don't change.
The prices don't change. Okay. Yeah, sorry, thank you. Those are like a federally mandated price. Whether you get it 2 minutes before the train leaves or you get it 6 months ahead of time, a regional train price is always going to cost the same amount. I think intercity, which is a different, and this is actually something I wanted to talk about because I think when you're not, I guess when you're looking at the screen, like at the train station of like what to think, or even on the computer, it's a little confusing. And it was confusing for us because when I think regional, I have a different, intercity to me makes things like it'll go to every single city, but regional, I'm like, oh, it'll only go to the big ones in the region or something. Mm-hmm. And it's not. The regional is like the local train. It'll hit every single train station between like here and wherever you're going. And it can take hours. I mean, I took a regional from Rome to Naples and it was like 4 hours. The fast train is 2. The intercity is 3. And the intercity is the one that does hit only the bigger train station.
Okay.
Yeah. So the price scales. The regional is much cheaper. The intercity is a little bit more expensive. The Frecciarossa, which is the fast train, is the most expensive. And that can like I think a regional train is 20 euros, basically 30 euros from Rome to Naples, if you're okay with a 4-hour journey. But then the Frecciarossa could be a $70 or $80 journey. So that's all to say. To recap for everyone who's like, okay, my brain's whirling, what's going on? There are different levels of trains. The easiest thing to remember is there's regional, which is the slow train that hits every train station. There's intercity, which is a slightly faster train that hits fewer train stations. And there's the Frecciarossa. That is the fastest train, and it hits only big city stations. So that might be Florence, and that might be Rome, that is going to be like Venice. However, in that sense, I don't think there's a Frecciarossa to Siena, for example, because mm-hmm. Siena, while it's a very famous city, is not like, they don't have a fast train line there. And that's something you will probably find, again, depending where you go, dear listener, because it might pass through, like the fast train going from Salerno to Reggio Calabria will pass through a lot of different train stations, but it will not stop at any of them. It'll only stop at Salerno and Reggio Calabria, despite the fact it passed through like 40.
I'm wondering, talking about the regional and intercity trains, there are some where you're not guaranteed a seat.
Yes. So regional, you are not guaranteed a seat.
Okay. Because we've been on trains where people are just standing
yes.
the whole time, just business people going about their day. Okay. I'm just meaning like people use it to get back and forth from work if they work in a big city or something. They take the train, and I mean it reminds me of the subway in New York.
Sure.
That there are people who are just like, yeah, the train is packed every day at 6:30 when we all get off or whatever it is, and we're just all standing. The point is that it's normal.
And actually, so let's maybe start with that, and maybe at some point in the future we'll do another kind of like. More focused on like the differences in trains and stuff. But very briefly, in Rome and in Naples, and I believe in Milan, and I know for sure in Florence, the regional train will hit multiple train stations in one major city. So like in Rome, I think there's 4 or 5, something like that, 4 or 5, like regional train stations, I believe. Mm-hmm. So some people find it easier to use a regional train than the metro because the metro might not go towards its location, but regional train will. And within a city, it's typically federally mandated that the price has to be the same as public transportation within that city. So in Rome, it's only $150. Even though you're going 4 stops, it's still $150 because
and
it's
you're
still
on a train
rather
than a metro, which I mean they're very similar, but
they look very different.
Yeah.
Like one's like a train, and the other one's like graffiti, and less nice. No, I think that's a really good point, because that is on a regional train, you are not guaranteed a seat in the sense of, might have 800 seats on board and they've sold 800 tickets, but it doesn't necessarily like.
They're allowed to sell more tickets than there are seats.
I think so, yeah.
Just like the subway.
Well, I think so, because it's just, there's no, just like, yeah, it just, because they also, part of it is, the two things with the regional train is, one, your ticket is not for a certain time. Even though you get we're going to have a link in the description to Trainline. That's an English language train and bus aggregate website. If you use the link, it's an affiliate link. It helps us out. We really do appreciate it. But if you use that to book your ticket, it's quite easy just because it is in English and you can kind of see what you're doing. But even though it says, let's say you're taking the 9:30 regional train, when you actually see the ticket, there is no time on there whatsoever. In fact, what you have to do is check in for your trip. That is super important. If you do not check in for your trip and the train conductor comes by and looks at your ticket and says, oh, you didn't check in, you do get a fine.
Is that the same as validating your ticket?
Yes.
Okay. And the ticket will say, like, you have to validate this ticket. And that means there are these little, they kind of look like hand sanitizer stations.
Yeah, that's fair.
Inside the station, it's like stuck to a wall. There's several around, like on the platforms and kind of at the fronts of the stations. It's a little machine. You stick your ticket in and it goes, makes a little
pretty good sound.
Thank you, noise. And does it stamp it? What does it do?
Yes, it just stamps it, yeah. However, if you bought it and you have the ticket on your phone, it should scan the QR code on your phone. It does not. They never work. I don't think they ever worked. So instead, what you do is when it's on your phone, and this is why I say Trainline, because it does get complicated. If you use Trenitalia, which is like the national website, it's way more complicated. But there's a little check-in barcode, and you click it, it brings you to the website, and you just click Start Journey, I think, or Check-in for Journey, which is why I use the terminology check-in, because online it uses check-in, not validate. But if you get the ticket at the train station, it says validate. So, and again, if you're still with me and you're not fully confused at this point, this is also super important if you are, let's say, going from Siena to Rome, but your Siena to Florence trip, because it'll probably bring you to a big city. That might be on a regional train. And then from Florence to Rome, you're on a fast train. At the beginning of that trip, you have to validate your ticket for
beginning in Siena.
Beginning in Siena. And then vice versa, though. If you're going from Rome to Florence and then to Siena, even though your regional train does not leave Florence till whenever, they will still ask you to validate your ticket at
so you, no matter where the regional leg of your journey is, you have to check in, I'm using air quotes, or validate before at the initial part.
Exactly.
When you initiate the first part of your journey.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I mentioned earlier, if you recall, that the regional train ticket is not necessarily good for one time slot, which is why they oversell tickets. It's because it's good for once it's validated, it's good till the end of that day. So if you're, again, using this example, you're going from Rome on the fast train to Florence, you switch in Florence for the regional train, and then you're going to go, I think, south to Siena. You have to validate before you get on the fast train from Rome to Florence. If you don't, there's no way to do it afterwards. Like as soon as the Frecciarossa, as soon as the fast train leaves, the check-in now gets grayed out, and there's no way.
Really?
I know. I have my last trip that I took myself going to Naples. I found this out the hard way because I've never really it just one of the things that we've been here for so long, and I would almost always take, we almost never take a regional train. And this is one of the few times I took a regional train, and because it was combined with another leg, I didn't realize that once that first leg started, there's no way to...
So if you're taking the fast train, the Frecciarossa, do you have to validate or check in for that ticket? You don't, because it has a specific time slot.
It has a specific time slot and a specific seat. So they'll come by and check your ticket, like they back in the day would have stamped your ticket or clipped a corner. Now they just scan it with a QR code or double check the there's a little confirmation code on it, and they'll just double check that to make sure, it says 3 people with this confirmation code. They'll look around like, all right, there's 3 of you. Okay,
so I didn't know this. So if you, listener, are booking, like Nathaniel's saying, like a 2-leg or 3-leg trip.
Yeah.
And part of that trip, if you don't know, like, how am I supposed to know if it's regional or inner city or whatever it is, it should say it.
For sure.
And if you do not have an assigned seat, check to see if there's like a check-in or validate button before you start your trip. Just like whenever you're going to fly, you check in before you get to the airport, or when you get to the airport. So do that with your regional trains. And going
back to that, just as a final little bit of information for that example, from Rome to Florence, your fast train from Florence to Siena, regional train. If you miss that regional train, whether by your own fault or the train company's fault, this is where it's, I guess, important or good to know that a regional train ticket does not have a specific time slot. So you can just catch the next one without an issue. And I think that's actually a really good segue into what to do before getting into like even how to book the train, maybe what to do if you've missed your train.
Yeah, tell me.
Because that's something that I'm super excited. Like a year ago, I wrote an article on our website about what to do if you missed your train in Italy, because everybody, like, if you look at like how to build a website, they're all like, just type stuff in Google and figure out what the SEO is. And I don't know. Clearly, I don't know this terminology. I feel like somebody like, I don't know what the phone is. But no, so it was like all these questions that people type in Google, and they recommend that one thing that you, dear listener, might have realized from a lot of websites is not necessarily news websites, but other websites, is a lot of times the name of that blog post or whatever is in the form of a question, because they're trying to match the question that somebody asked. So I wrote this lovely thing on what to do if you missed your train in Italy. And this year, apparently a lot of people missed their train in Italy because it got I felt really bad. It got some clicks, which I was like, oh, amazing for me, but absolutely terrible for everybody else who's going through this.
Okay.
And we've missed our train a number of times in Italy. It is, I don't know, it's not a guarantee, but it's certainly the more times you take a train in Italy, the more likely it is to happen. And we mentioned at the end of this past episode, I think, without getting too political, there's a petition to remove Salvini, who has sort of just tumbled his way through Italian politics.
That's a good way to say it.
Just destructive in everything he does, and ended up as the transportation minister. And it was this summer, I think, he like wanted to start all these sort of like projects, basically fixing this and repairing that and doing train work. And they typically only, in our experience, they do during Ferragosto, which we've talked about Ferragosto being this big national holiday in Italy.
In August.
They sometimes will do train work then, because it happens to be, there's a time there where a lot of people have already ended up at their, like, where they're going to go.
Like their travel destination, yeah.
So they're like,
everybody's vacationing.
Exactly. So they need to do these like last minute, like, oh, we just need to get through this season. Ferragosto does seem to be a good time to do it. But typically the winter is when they, do fixing things, because it's the winter and nobody is taking the train as they are in the summer. So he's under fire right now because he's planned a lot of the maintenance for the summer, leading to major delays, cancellations.
Meaning before August? Like
June, July. And even early August.
That was a bad choice.
Yeah, it was because also it reflects poorly, obviously, on Italy, and it reflects poorly on the company itself. It reflects poorly on just everything.
That seems like peak travel season.
And it's also
for
peak
everybody.
like. And as we'll get into in just a second, it's on them. They have to reimburse.
Right.
So it becomes a huge financial disaster.
That was a sad choice for him.
Yeah. So what do you do if you miss your train in Italy? First things first, as per the website, don't panic. But no, it's important to deep breaths, not panic, and sort of be calm, because it happens a lot. And in any given day, there will be hundreds of people who have missed a train, not necessarily because the train was canceled, just because this is Italy. And the second thing to do is figure out if it's your fault or the train's fault. And a good way to know this is if you are late to the train station, unfortunately, it's your fault. If you woke up late, something like that, if you're in Rome and there's a bus strike and you couldn't get to the train station, anything like that, traffic, it's your fault. And that's pretty much the only time it'll be your fault. Once you've checked in for the thing, or once you've scanned in for your ticket, because most big train stations in Italy, like airports, will have a little like turnstiles, like glass turnstiles, where they're not even turnstiles, they have doors that open. So you have to scan your ticket and they let you in, and they only let you in.
Booth.
Yeah, like a toll booth. And they only let you in if your ticket is going to be good in the next 4 hours. So that way you can't just chill out in the trains. It's supposed to, but I think one, alleviate a lot of the pressure near the trains, like just the people pressure. But two, it's supposed to be a safety thing, I think. So nobody who doesn't have a ticket can't sneak on board a train.
I would imagine too, safety-wise, so that people don't clog up the platforms and people don't fall on the tracks. Like if there's only so many people out in there in that area, less congestion.
Exactly. I think that's a good point too. So that all being said, is once you're in there, then it changes. Then it's, if there's a delay or cancellation, it's on them. So yeah, that's the first thing, figuring out whose fault it is. And And I guess like step 3 is if you're at the train station, a big one especially, try to find the help desk and explain the situation. Even if it is your fault, sometimes you can kind of get away with being really polite and being sort of like not necessarily, but like, I mean, basically just being polite and accepting, like, I know, that this happened, but is there any way that I can get into the next? Mm-hmm. Because it's, again, I want to, like, I keep repeating, it's almost like one of those things that rules are written in Italy and then not followed because this is Italy, So it's kind of like, I mean, it's like you took if you take the bus in Rome to the train station and it's late because it's Rome and it gotten this, or there's a strike or there's traffic or whatever it is, you can explain that to the people at the train station, and there's a really good chance that they'll say, like, no, I get it. I've also taken the bus in Rome. It's a nightmare. Don't worry, I got you in the next, train. This is not a problem. We got some empty seats in this next ticket. Yeah.
I do want to say, before I forget, related to finding people who can help you at the help desk, sometimes they can be difficult to find. Mm-hmm. We were getting tickets from the little ticket machine once at Termini in Rome, and there was somebody in front of us who, it was of no fault of their own. It's like their card was getting rejected by the machine because it didn't understand like the bank that the card was associated with. And I think the people were like English as a second language, but their first language wasn't available on the machine. So anyways, they were having struggles. And so I told them, I'm like, right here, just next to us, there is a person in this box.
Yeah,
the box
right.
does look like it's a machine, but if you go to the front, there's a person sitting in this little cubicle.
Yeah.
They speak English. They understood my English. Sweet people. And they can help you. So that one, it wasn't like the assistant person. They weren't like centrally located in the center of the train station, right where you can always see them. They're kind of off to the left, and at the side it looked like another machine. So that was one of them. I think in Florence, the train station, it is more obvious. Their little help thing is along the wall. In Siena, it's not obvious at all. Where you have to go to buy tickets and get help is underground.
Yeah.
There's like we've talked about this before, but the bus station is, this big kind of like bus parking lot. But then where you buy bus tickets and everything, you literally have to go down this ramp underground.
Yeah.
And all that is there is the offices for the tickets.
But also Milan, I walked around a while trying to find that kind of stuff. And it was just, it's not easily located. Salerno, same thing. Like the lounge might be easily located, but the help people or where you buy a ticket from, not so much. Mm-hmm.
But usually there is one person there who can help.
Oh, for sure. Oh, easily. Yeah,
Which,
yeah.
I mean, that seems like that would panic me if I were looking around and I'm in a random country and I don't speak the language and I don't immediately see someone who can help me. I think that could throw me into a spiral. So
for sure. But there's definitely people
around.
There's
going to be somebody who can help you.
On that note, too, you probably aren't listening to this podcast if you rely on people signing a language. But
right.
In case you are traveling with somebody who does, the Train Italia people they're supposed to video chat a translator, I think it's supposed to be ESL, like English Sign Language, or ASL, American Sign Language, I guess if you're not English listening to this, into Italian. So like I
think it's ASL and BSL, by the way.
Is it BSL, not ESL? Okay, that's good to know. British Sign Language, that makes sense. So they translate basically the American Sign Language into Italian for the person so they can understand what's going on, and then back to ASL. It's an attempt to basically make the absolute horror that is a train station in Italy a little bit more manageable.
A little more accessible.
So that is, in case you're traveling with somebody who does need something signed to them, that is an option. So yeah, that's a really good point, that there are definitely people to help. So all that being said is I would definitely plead your case to these people, but don't be angry, because they also is kind of like to hold the balance.
They hold the power.
Yeah. So don't be, it's kind of like, I don't know. I think in America, it's like there's a, it sounds terrible, but like when you're at the airport and you see people screaming at the customer service and they can't really do anything like until that person crosses the line, they have to just sort of sit there and take it. Italy, not remotely the same. They could absolutely just start it's a very powerful union. They could just be like, oh, you wanted to get on a train today? Good luck ever getting on a train again in your life. So I really wouldn't don't be angry, I think is a really good thing. And if you're panicking and you're scared, it totally makes sense. They understand that, but I'd recommend not being angry. Trying to explain the situation if you did miss the train on some of your own part of what happened. And I say this too because if you've missed the train on your own, you can't use your ticket to get another ticket. You can't, like, if you've missed it, you missed it. And there's no way to be like, well, I just bought a ticket. I know I missed the train. They're just like, I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do.
And you probably already know this, but the train time, like your ticket time, that is when the train departs. Mm-hmm. You need to be there before that time.
That's a good point. It is not the time
your boarding time.
Yeah, that is
That is when the train leaves.
And don't panic too, because sometimes, or not sometimes, almost every time, the fast trains especially, like if the train leaves at 11:05, you might not get a platform number till 11 or 11:01. Mm-hmm. The train might not get there till 11:03, and then it'll leave at 11:05. There really are tight turnarounds on a lot of these. So, if you haven't seen your train and you're like, oh, it's 10 minutes away, it might be because it's not there yet.
Mm-hmm. So just quickly, this happens every time we take a train. They blow the little whistle, which mm-hmm. is like the warning whistle, which is just, hey, you guys, you probably want to finish your smoke break, get on the train. But to my mind, it is, Darcy, you're going to miss your train if you do not hustle your butt to your carriage.
Yeah.
If you feel like you're not going to make the train, but you're trying to get to the end. These trains are quite long sometimes. If you're trying to get to like carriage 12 and you're at carriage
9.
9, is that okay? They always seem so far away. I have small legs.
Well, I think 9 is as far as they go.
Okay. If you're trying to get to carriage 9, you're at carriage 2, and you're like, there's no way I'm going to make it. You can get on early and walk through the center of the train.
Yes.
On the fast trains.
And even on the fast trains, they will let you know when you buy your ticket if they're they will tell you like carriages 1 to 4 cannot be accessed from carriages 5 to 7 or 5 to 8 or whatever it is, because sometimes they'll put 2 short trains together, I guess, and they have like so I don't know, but they put the noses of 2 trains together.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So you can't actually walk from one side to the other. That's not frequently. That's not often. They will let you know. I think if not on the ticket, at least when you buy the ticket from online or from the ticket machine or from a person.
And you can usually tell. Like you can see it.
Oh, physically, yeah, it's very obvious. It's just in case you're super late and you get on one, you might not. Again, this is the thing, and I'll get into this in literally 2 seconds. But the conductors are quite understanding, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, you're gonna have to get off at the next station, and then physically walk up and then get back on." Going back to what did you do if you missed your train?
Yes.
Plead your case. Try to get on the next one. But worst case scenario, they will just make you buy a new ticket. As we've explained, it's not going to be astronomical. So this is kind of going back to that thing of, don't panic too much. It will be a hit, especially if there's like a budget trip for you, but there will be other options available. If it's again regional or intercity, you have a much better chance of getting regional. Immediately you can get on the next train. There's no problem. Your ticket is good for the day. Intercity, maybe you can get on the next train, but that's something again you're gonna have to ask. Like, can I just get on the next one? And 9 times out of 10 they'll say yes. Frecciarossa is the only one where they're a little bit like, ooh, I don't know about that. The other time you can miss your train is if you've arrived at one station and you have a transfer and you've missed your train. That is, you're covered, basically. You're completely covered. If you missed your transfer, at least as you and I have done it, because so many times we leave the platform and miss the next train waiting in line to see what we do. And the person behind the glass told us, like, no, you should have stayed there. You could just take the next train out. And you talk to the conductor and they'll tell you where to sit. So what we have learned is that whether it's Frecciarossa or regional or intercity or whatever it is, if you are switching in like, I don't know, Florence or something like that, because you're going up east and they're going west or whatever it is, and you happen to miss the connection, which is not unlikely. Again, we mentioned this just minutes ago, but sometimes a train will arrive only 3 minutes before they're set to leave, and they do not care if there is 48 people, if there are 48 people getting off one train and then have to go 6 platforms over to get to the train that they're about to leave on. And I felt really bad. There was one group of American women that we were next to, and one of their friends, I think 3 of them were just like sprinting for it, and one of their friends was like, there's no way we're going to catch it. But the 3 friends that sprinted for it did catch it, and their friend missed it, and she had to basically wait to an hour and a half later, which I feel like it just goes to show if you sprint for it, you might make it. So all that being said is, yes, you should be able to just get on the next train because that's not your fault. It was the connection there it's a tight connection. People miss their trains. That happens. It probably is a little bit different if it's like you had an hour and you were in the bathroom and missed your train. Maybe it's a little bit weirder then. But I guess the other thing I was going to say too is if you're not in a place like Rome or you're not in a place like Milan where you can't physically get to the train, like Salerno, for instance, is which you might be there if you're going to the Amalfi Coast and you're leaving back, you're going to go to Rome. There's no one checking to see if you can get in. If you missed your train, you could absolutely just try to take the next one, but first talk to the conductor, because in our experience, the conductors are sort of like mini gods of the train, if that makes sense. Like they get to decide who goes on and who does not. And if you explain like we just missed the last one by like a second, is there any way we can get this? We have tickets, blah blah blah, and explain it to them. There's a really good chance they'll be like, yeah, that's no problem. But I would not recommend. Like the biggest thing I think you and I would not recommend is just getting on a Frecciarossa without a ticket, because that fine I think is like 250 euros per person, versus the regional train ticket, which is like 20 euros per person.
What do you mean getting on without a ticket?
Like if you missed it and you don't want to talk to anybody like a conductor, this and that, you're just going to go on and try not to address it. Getting caught there is a lot more expensive. I don't think there's an option there. So basically some trains allow you to buy a ticket on board. That's not one of them. Like the Leonardo Express from the airport, I think allows you to buy a ticket on board for a little bit more money. I think there's a few others like that, but otherwise you should have bought one ahead of time. So yeah, when you miss your train in Italy, it's just essentially try to plead your case. And because this is Italy, there's a really good chance you'll get on the next train without paying extra. So I guess that brings us to like the best time to book the train, to recap, because we did kind of mention it in there, is regional, any point up until the train leaves. You can buy a regional ticket. That one's the best time. I think the best place to buy one is actually at the train station. Right? Would you say? Because that way you just show up at the train station when you're ready. You get the regional ticket. No harm, no foul. For the fast trains, I recommend them online ahead of time, even if it's like a week or two. But just so you have it on your phone, you can get it printed out if you prefer it printed out. But you have sort of like confirmation of where it is and where you're sitting. Intercity can also be one of those that are either online or at the train station. And our experience is that Intercity tends to be, I don't know, it's like not as low. Because the regional, a lot of people use it because it's cheap, and it stops at every like beachfront town between Reggio Calabria and Salerno. So those are always packed, those trains. But the Intercity, it's like rarely packed, and I don't understand, for being like $10 more than the Intercity. I think people just spend the $25 to be on the $25 more than the regional to be on like Frecciarossa. So I think it's kind of falls into a weird price point where it's like slightly more expensive than the cheap one and slightly cheaper than the expensive one. And it's like, I'll just choose one of the other two. But the other reason is if you wait or keep your eye on it, especially Trenitalia and Trainline will have different deals and discounts. If you're traveling as two people, there's Frecciarossa, especially the fast train, has a deal where it's like 2 for 1. So you get 2 tickets for the price of 1.
Isn't that it's called You and Me?
You and Me, yeah.
They in have English everywhere. Yeah, that's not English. Like the translation. That's what it's called in Italy.
In Italy, they'll be like, scopare, you and me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So that's the You and Me, and you're looking, is it not scopare? What is it?
Scoprire.
Scoprire? Because I think it's to sweep. It's like sweep it. Yeah.
Maybe it is. Is that what they say?
They have it. Like I think that's little ads. Yeah, I get these little emails. But
maybe it is. Okay.
To be fair, I don't pay that much attention to them because it might not be scope out. It might be something else like scope it out. I don't know. I should probably look at the ads before I start repeating them.
But it definitely says You and Me.
Yeah, it definitely says You and Me in English. Biglietti You and Me. There's also like 2x1 is what it says, but that's where you can get, I think it's like 2 tickets with an extra one for free kind of thing. And there are all these little deals. There's a family deals. There's, there's
the young price, which is like under 35. And then there's like the older price, which is like over 65.
The young price is under 30. And the older price is over 55.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. The young price, by the way, if you're listening to this and you're super excited because you're like, I'm under 30 and I can take it. You can, but you have to, I think, have a Codice Fiscale in Italy. So you have to double check because they want to validate they're actually young.
That makes sense.
You might, anybody can get a Codice Fiscale in Italy. They give you one when you get a phone SIM plan for the week you're here. But you might have to get one like ahead of time and get that discount. But we've also noticed too, it's if you're traveling with another person, it's not cheaper. It's the You and Me is always cheaper than the young price. However, same thing if you're over 55 and you can get the Codice Fiscale ahead of time, that is a really good deal. Because that's not just, I think the young price, I think the young price is only for like economy or something like that, but then the older price is like all the way up to business. They give you a nice deal. So I'm like, oh, okay. So yes, that was the other thing is if you wait on a train ticket until you got your flight, you have your hotel, and you go to the Trenitalia or you go to Trainline. Both links will be in the description. And you just kind of keep your eye on it. Every couple of days you go back to it and you check it because they'll have usually the deals work out something like if you purchase a ticket between July 1st and July 14th and use that ticket between August 1st and August 15th, you can get X amount of money off. And this is for Frecharosa. Sometimes it's for the overnight trains. If you prefer taking an overnight train, that is a slower option, but could be something you like if you want to basically go to sleep in Rome and wake up in Venice kind of thing.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's they're bringing them back because I think a lot of people are tired of the fast trains in the sense of nobody wants to leave at 11 at night and get there at 1 in the morning.
Yeah,
they want to leave at 11 at night and get there at 7 in the morning. So the idea of slow travel is coming back because it feels like the sleeping time's like wasted time anyway. So you might as well incorporate that into the trip, especially for people who take a weekend trips because it's like, you're not exactly going to leave work at, when you leave work at 8 or whatever it is and get on the train, it's like you're still wasted time. You might as well just get there in the morning and then you don't have to, sleep. You can just drop off your stuff at the hotel, drop off your bags at the hotel and only book for one night in a hotel room. So all that being said is yes, those are the big things.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said booking on Trainline or Trenitalia, but those are not equal things, right?
Yes and no. They are essentially equal, but what are you...
Trainline is an aggregate. Trenitalia is a train company.
Yes, but in Italy there are only two different train companies, Trenitalia and Italo. If you want to go on Italo, you can. It is a private train company that is a fast train only. It's almost never cheaper than Trenitalia, and I'm someone who likes a table. And almost all the Frecharosa and all the intercity trains have a table. So
and that's on the company Trenitalia.
That's on the company Trenitalia, okay. Yeah, with the trains Frecharosa and intercity. This does mean you will be, if you're traveling alone, you might be sitting with 3 other people in this little because it's two chairs looking at 2 other chairs with a table in between. And I think I'd like it because as you and I go, because I look at you, and yes, there's sometimes people next to us, and you make
kind of cute. People are usually really nice.
You make conversation and this and that, and then there's there's always like the what is it, the deli, not the deli cart, the cafe car.
Snack cart?
Yeah, the cafe car is number 7, and you go and you get your little coffee and your little this and your that. And I think you and I like that because also I work a lot on the train, so it's nice to have a little table. But the Italo has, I think maybe one of the things in the middle has a table because half the seats look one way, half the seats look the other way. And then there's a table in the middle. And it's nice, but as somebody who's tall, I get no leg room on those. So I think it's just like my personal preference is I almost never pitch Italos for people.
But can you book trains in other parts of Europe with Trainline?
Yes.
Okay, so that was my clarification. Like if you're going on a European trip, you can book all of your trains through Trainline, but you cannot book all of your trains through Trenitalia.
You can't. That's a good point. You can't book. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Like you can't book any trains in Spain on Trenitalia, but if you're going from Paris to Turin,
Trenitalia,
then you can do it as long as it originates or leaves Spain, Italy. You can book on Trenitalia.
Okay.
But you're right. Trainline is for, I believe, all of Europe. It's just an aggregate, but within Italy, yeah, it's pretty much the same as Trenitalia. I mean, it's.
I'm also thinking there's the one that I learned about recently called Omio, which is which sounds Italian when I just said it, but I don't think it is. But it's like
Omio.
Yeah, Omio. It's like Trainline. It's an aggregate. It's like hotels.com or whatever. It just means that you can book your travel through that site. They show you the different options. So.
And that's, I think, the same thing. With flights are the only ones we typically go through the company itself. But I think with trains and with hotels, we kind of sometimes just do the aggregates because it's...
With Trenitalia, though, we often book through Trenitalia.
We do, but I think mostly because they have a reward point thing that we like to use.
That's true.
And because we have the
your little like rewards number code
exactly
thing.
And I think you can put those in on Trainline, but I just it's a silly little thing, but I'm just like, oh, if we use the train here, you might as well go through Trenitalia and get our little silly rewards, which we've never used. I've never used the rewards on anything.
But it's so fun to get the rewards.
I like that they tell me I get the points. But yeah, those are pretty much the only two ones that I'd recommend booking through.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
One thing that I want to mention is that Trenitalia runs buses as well.
Yes.
Along old train lines.
Mm-hmm.
Not on the train tracks, but the route that train would have taken. So like we live in a place where there was a train in the 1980s. It doesn't exist anymore, but they run buses the route of the train. So if we book a train trip from the town where we live to Rome, our initial leg is in a bus, which is run by the train company.
Yeah.
And then it takes us to a train station, and then we get the train.
Mm-hmm.
So that is just an option to, like, when you're traveling, it will have a note on it, but just keep in mind that if you're in a city or a town that does not have a train station, you may still be able to book a train ticket.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
And sometimes too, though, that is actually just a good idea to keep in mind anyway, is look at the ticket, because it tells you how many changes. And sometimes even if there's a train station, they will still put you on a bus for some reason.
Yeah.
So that is something that's actually a good point to keep in mind. And yeah, I think later we'll do a whole episode just specifically on like the do's and don'ts of trains and what the different trains mean, because I'm thinking too, even with families, it's like, I know I keep thinking with families because it feels like a big part of traveling. Like I feel like, there's a lot of solo travelers, but that one's a little bit more of like, take whatever you can and, have a blast. But with families, it feels like it's way more...
you want to have a little more structure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to be... like sometimes it's like, spend the extra money to get there quickly, so it's not a bunch of kids on a train for 6 hours. It's like we get in there 2 hours and then we're getting off and we're going to walk around. So I think it's a little bit easier, like fast train and things like that. So we'll do a whole little episode on like the differences in tickets, and because even within, because we didn't even talk about like the Freccia Bianca and the Freccia Argento, which are the different high speed quote unquote trains that are not high speed. And then there's the Freccia Rossa, which is they all mean arrow, so it's like red arrow, silver arrow, and white arrow. But then you mentioned buses. Yeah, do we want to briefly talk about buses before this?
Yeah, my big note on buses is that every general region has their own bus companies, which doesn't mean that they're like sponsored by the region, but they run within that region. So like we have Lamana and Curcio. Wow, I don't know why I can't say that. Curcio. And some other little smaller companies. Autolinea Toscana is huge, obviously in Tuscany.
But also, I think I could be wrong. Autolinea Toscana is the only bus company in Tuscany.
I think that's something. Yes, I think.
No, because I think that's something that they're going to try to. Here, it used to be all different bus companies had different livery, like different painting on the side, and now they've changed it to it's all blue and white with Regione Campania on the side. And even though it says La Regione Campania and it says like Lamana or Curcio or something like that underneath it, I think they're trying to make it, if it's a regional thing, they're trying to make it
that makes sense.
Because right now, even so, like Autolinea Toscana, it's like it's standard pricing across the board.
Yeah.
But here it is not. It's like the two different bus companies will offer two different prices. And sometimes it's like it's cheaper to go a short distance. Like on one, but cheaper on another to go a longer distance or whatever it is.
It was, I have to say, when we traveled, we were in, I think particularly when we traveled with my mom, we were in Florence and Siena, and it was amazing like how simple their system was.
Simple.
It was not simple to find the ticket station at the Siena bus station, but the buses worked like in sync. There we go, in sync with each other. Tickets worked across different routes because they were all the same company. Yeah, it functioned very well.
You can validate them on board rather than like, I don't know. Here you don't validate them. You buy the ticket on board, which is kind of like a weird process anyway. It makes a lot of sense because, they do stop off on the side of the road to pick people up. So you kind of need to be able to buy the tickets on board. And in Tuscany, I feel terrible. There's a couple got on board thinking it was the same thing.
Like that you could buy tickets on board?
Yeah, and he's like, oh no, you can't buy tickets on board. So what he did is he drove until he found the next kiosk just on the side of the road. There's a kiosk. We pull over for them to buy 2 tickets to get back on the bus.
That was so sweet though. But he didn't have to do that. I mean, he could have just been like, no, you can't get on the bus. He's like, no, get on the bus. Where are you going? We're going to find a place for you to buy tickets. And then we all waited for them.
Yeah. So it's kind of like we're all in the car together. No, that they have and I'm very envious of their bus system.
Yeah.
Because not all regions work like that. But if you are, I think the reason we wanted to talk about it, because more than likely, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably going to the big attractions in Italy, the big cities. But in case that you're doing something small in like the Dolomites, I think is what we call it in English, Dolomites?
Dolomites in English, yeah.
Dolomiti in Italian. Or if you're going... I think Como might have a train station, but like some of the other ones only have bus stops. Something like that. If you're kind of going a little bit off the beaten path, obviously Amalfi, all of those are buses. But Cinque Terre, that's all train. So it kind of depends.
Oh, it is all train.
I know,
You're
right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't think so, but it's all train. So it kind of depends. But if you're going to a popular but feasibly impossible to have a train through there, then you will be on a bus. And as we just mentioned in the little train segment part of this, that might be part of your train ticket. Like it'll be, and then you're going to switch to a bus sponsored by Train Italia. Or it might be you have to physically go to a different place, buy a ticket for a different company, and then get on that different.
In Salerno, we talked about this in the Amalfi Coast episodes. If you arrive to Salerno and you're going to the Amalfi Coast, there is another it's a short walk to the bus parking lot, and that is where you can buy a ticket to all of the towns on the Amalfi Coast to take the bus there. So that's an example of booking a train ticket that stops somewhere and then having to get a ticket that takes you to your final destination.
To be fair on that one, though, just wanted to clarify in case somebody is doing that soon, you can just take the bus from the Salerno train station to the Amalfi Coast. We didn't know because it's like 80 people trying to get on that bus. But if you go to the top of the line, which is only like 4 minutes away walking, there's nobody trying to get on that bus. So we figured, let's just go there and save ourselves the pain and heartache of like not having to sit next to each other on a bus to the Amalfi Coast. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of options like that. Even like I know a lot of people will land in Naples and take a bus to Sorrento. I think it's called like Cureri, I think is what it's called. And that's a bus that goes straight from the Naples airport to Sorrento. And again, that's the same thing. It's like as a private company, it doesn't go through Train Italia. It also might be this, I think, because it goes to I think at some point it goes to Naples main station. So again, if that's your way from Rome to Naples to Sorrento and not taking the train, it's a different ticket entirely. And those things, typically buses are not something you need that far in advance. If you are taking buses, and the only time I think if you're listening to this and you would take a bus that isn't to something small, like we just mentioned, the Dolomites, or like, you want to go to a small town outside of Venice, or you want to, you just want to go to a small town for the day to see like, what is small town Italy like? The only time I can think else that you'd use a bus is in Tuscany. And it's if you wanted to basically go from like Florence to Siena is a good example. And there's no good trains, so there's no good pricing or times for trains, because the bus runs a little bit more consistently at slightly better times, in my opinion, than the train.
And it gets you to the center of town in a place like Siena, where the train station is way below town, and you have to take a city bus up into town. That's
a really good point. Yeah, the bus gets you right into town, so it's actually a lot easier depending on how much luggage you have and how many people you're traveling with. The other thing is if you're going to a place like San Gimignano, which is like the city, or really it's a town of towers, the only way there is buses. So that might be something where you're going to be taking a bus kind of consistently. But otherwise, I think you're going to be on the trains. And I think for buses, you said Omio, Trainline, you can also buy buses. And there's one called, there's Get by Bus. There's also Bus Bud. And those are all aggregates.
I wouldn't recommend Bus Bud, though. I tried it earlier for this episode, and it didn't have a lot. That was the one that kept recommending BlaBlaCar to everywhere.
Oh,
it just was not updated with available
buses. Okay, because we've used Bus Bud before in the past, and with good results, because I think we used Bus Bud or Get by Bus in North Macedonia, and it worked really well.
Yeah, we did.
And that was a fun one, just because we could not figure out where else you could get a bus. And
there's also Flixbus.
Flixbus, which is not an aggregate, it's just
it's just a company.
That's really good. Low price buses that are really solid. They don't go everywhere, but they don't go at great times. They typically go like early in the morning and later in the evening, which is one of the reasons it's so cheap. But they're really good. I mean, it's like one of those $7 bus tickets, to go from Rome to Milan kind of, silly thing. Not silly. It's phenomenal if you're a student or a budget traveler. I've taken the Flixbus a few times, and they're good. No, and that's the thing. Yeah. And there's a lot of, there's like Marino Bus and a few other ones, Ita Bus, things like that in Italy. So if you are a big bus fan, if you like the idea of being on a highway instead of a train track, or if you, because I think sometimes the bus is, to be fair, a little more interesting because you do get to see things you might not on a train. Because sometimes the train just goes through industrial area.
I like the train though because I get car sick, so I get bus sick, but I don't get train sick.
And I like the train because I need leg room. And also, I can't fit in the bathrooms on a bus.
Nope.
That's ridiculous. I'm like, hobbit hole is this bathroom? And I can barely fit in there.
I'm the size of a hobbit, so that's not so much of a problem for me.
That's more of a compliment at the point. So I think, and is that everything for buses and trains?
I think so.
So very briefly to recap, just I wanted to throw it out there. If it's hotels, as early as possible, whenever you decide your trip, make it changeable, make it movable. So if there is a change in your plans, no harm, no foul. Yeah? Mm-hmm. And then for flights?
Yeah, flights are the next thing that I would book. Book those 4 to 6 weeks out from your planned time you're going to be there. And
also changeable, also movable?
Yeah, if you can afford it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's what we always do. We always get movable and changeable.
Which is kind of a mini fortune I will say, because sometimes it's like an extra $300 per ticket, which is a lot when the ticket's only $550 originally.
They lump everything together too. They lump seat selection in there as well as a free checked bag. Which used to be standard.
I know,
also,
right? Seat
selection, I think, used to be standard. They're just nickel and diming people. But so we often plump for the slightly more expensive, like the main cabin or whatever things call it, to get the changeable ticket and
to choose
a checked bag and choose seats.
That makes sense. So 4 to 6 weeks out, and if you can, and especially if you've already gotten like changeable / cancelable hotel rooms for free, I would do the same thing for your flights, and then. What's in trains?
Mm-hmm. Trains and buses is the last thing that you would need to book.
And those things really could be, depending how long your trip is, you could do those. Like I said, if you happen to catch one of those sales, you could do that ahead of time. You don't necessarily need a sale or any Codici Fiscale, anything special for the you and me or the 2x1 or the family or anything like that. All of those are offered to everybody, tourists and nationals alike. So that's not something you need a Codici. Those are only for the Codici Fiscale. The fiscal code is only for if you're trying to get like a senior discount or a youth discount. And then buses, those I don't think change in price at all. Those are pretty much.
And in fact, some of them, like we said, you do have to buy the ticket on board. So you would be buying that the day of.
The day of. So that's not something to really panic about until you need to. I mean, why worry? And then I think we were going to talk about reviews, but only thing I wanted to really mention is just. Because later I did want to kind of get into, I get a little crazy, I realize, when it comes to like flights. I think we mentioned this last episode that like Kayak, for instance, allows you to book to take away Boeing if you don't trust Boeing and you want to fly only Airbus. I go even crazier than that, and I try to look up like, what is the American Airlines seat configuration on an Airbus 330A built in so and so, to try to figure out like exactly where I'm going to be and exactly how much leg room I have. So I get really quite just like I don't know, it's narrow-minded, like single-focus minded on it, I guess. So I was going to talk about that in a later episode. But with a lot of these, like the hotels, Booking and Expedia will have their own reviews. I would also check Google Maps will have reviews of them, as will like TripAdvisor. That's always a helpful. I mean, TripAdvisor less so because I don't know. It's just sometimes I don't really trust the TripAdvisor ones. The Google ones I tend to trust more. But again, I only mention this because sometimes it might be like a 3 stars, it might add a 5 stars, and you're like, that doesn't look good. But when you look into the 1-star reviews, it's some of the stuff we mentioned in that hotel episode, which was like, there's scuffs on the wall, and
the shower was too small because it's Italian sized, or it like we said in the hotels episode, a lot of average Italian hotels are not what we expect as average Americans. So we always look at the 1-star reviews to see what people say, because if it's like, there were giant stains on the bed and a dead animal in my room. Yeah. You know, like that's not good. That's bad. But if it's, you know, the shower's too small, there were scuffs on the walls, like it was, you know, the walls were not all, like sometimes they'll be like, if there's been past water damage or something, sometimes people think it's mold and it's not. There are a lot of things.
One light bulb and like it's not that much light in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is classic.
Yeah. So that's something I just wanted to mention. Like it's a good idea to look at reviews for that. I mean, you don't really need to look at reviews for bus or train. It's kind of like, it is what it is. I mean, I don't get that crazy with it because it's just sort of, a bus is going to be miserable one way or the other. Not really. Some buses are really nice. But the train's usually really nice, in my opinion. And the flights, I mean, you can't really look at reviews for flights. We have tried, like, especially when you're comparing, like, I don't know, Air Canada to, like, Air Brussels or something like that. I'm like, that's 2 airlines I've never flown in my life. But at a certain point...
I have a review for Delta, and I quite like Delta.
You have a review?
I'm giving my review right now. My review is that I like Delta.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you have, like, I'm like, you've reviewed it officially? Like, people, they sought you out for this? I was so confused. Yeah, no, Delta, we fly Delta a lot because we were like, between the seat configuration, the movie selection, and then the fact that we like the airports they fly to, we like the ones they fly out of.
And hopefully the flight attendants are paid well and treated well because they always seem to be very happy people.
Yeah, on Delta?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're not like forced to be happy.
Right.
Hopefully they're actually happy because they love their jobs.
That would be a dream. So I think that's everything. And like we keep saying, like, in later episodes, but we will get more in depth into like the differences of trains and what to expect and maybe like the best habits for booking a flight as far as not even booking a flight, like how to prepare for your flight and what to research for your flight and things like that. Again, this is just if you're really into, I mean, I'm like
bring noise canceling headphones and eye drops.
Exactly, stuff like that. That's what I think that'll be fun to kind of cover, especially if you don't fly that frequently. If you're like, wow, I haven't flown in a while. What's changed since COVID? What's changed since 10 years ago or whatever? Because I think people don't fly that frequently to Europe. I mean, I don't. Besides us, I don't think I knew anybody else who flies that frequently. Just because your family in the States, we have to go visit. But so I feel like we have a lot of knowledge that we gained against our will about flying. So yeah, I think that's everything.
I think that's it.
Awesome. So thank you all so much for listening to this episode. It's been 2 hours. I apologize. Our voices are probably going. If you'd like to support us, we are putting a couple of affiliate links in the description of both episodes. And yeah, no, it helps with the channel if you use them before booking something, before buying something, before, I guess finding where you want to stay. As we mentioned though, as much as it would be really cool if you use our like booking.com or Expedia link for a flight, we do recommend that you book directly through an airline. That way, if there is an issue, you can deal with them directly rather than like through Booking or through Expedia, because that can kind of get a little messy. But I think that's everything then.
I think that's it. If you have any questions about your stay, about hotels, about flights, about trains and buses, you can contact us. You can email us at onlyabagpodcast.
Onlyabagpodcast
at
gmail.com.
Or you can find us on Instagram at onlyabagpodcast. I don't know why I'm suddenly having so much trouble talking.
I know, he's been talking for a while.
And then our website
You're a very quiet person, I think. That's why.
I am. Or our website is onlyabag.com.
Yes.
You can contact us there as well if you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes.
You can also leave a comment if you're listening to this on Spotify. If you're not listening to this on Spotify, then that's awesome. And you should not change. If you could leave a rating and follow us, we would deeply appreciate it as well. It does help us out in the algorithm. They treat us more valuably, and don't we all?
Also, it makes us happy.
It really makes us happy. That's the main takeaway here. So yeah, thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next Wednesday.